Choo choo. The hype train for the Ole Miss 2024 football season is leaving the station. We'll show you the first two articles that came out about the Rebs in 2024. Plus, we have four players that are probably the next four players that Ole Miss fans need to watch in the transfer portal as well. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran of the member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Also did a little stint in Nashville at WSMV. Today on the show, we tell you who are four names to watch next in the transfer portal, and the 2024 hype has kicked off, and it is so lovely. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make this show what it is. Now, the hype train we have been talking about for weeks about what could happen. And after Alabama laid the egg that it did, by the way, Alabama getting rid of tempo as part of their offense and basically becoming a Big Ten team is one of the most baffling decisions I've ever seen any team make. What made them dominant in the late 2000 teens and into the early 2020s, Georgia broke Alabama. I understand that Alabama beat Georgia this year, but it turns out that game was probably a fluke, and Georgia was probably the best team in the country this year. It just kind of is what it is. But the hype for Ole Miss is going to be just completely off the charts going into this season. And one of the things you need to pay attention to are different stuff that's being said. For instance, from 24/7 Sports, they're going to put out their way too early win total projections. They're setting the over-under for Ole Miss winning at 10. They said everyone's favorite offseason juggernaut ahead of the 2024 season will be Lane Kiffin's Rebels, thanks to an infusion of talent via the transfer portal and a number of key returning superstars, including Jackson Dart, who will be a preseason Heisman hopeful, running back Quinshon Judkins, and top wideout Trey Harris. Coming off their first 11-win season under Kiffin, the Rebels will have one of the nation's most favorable paths to a spot in the 12-team playoff given their schedule. Looking ahead, there's a chance the Ole Miss will be favored in 10 of 12 games, and they'll play 6 FBS teams, which missed bowl season completely. That's really something difficult to say in today's day and age. In the new SEC, the Rebels will miss Alabama and Texas and play a combination of Oklahoma and Georgia at home, with a road trip to LSU being their first game against a likely nationally ranked opponent in mid-October. Schedule favorability is critical in the SEC, and 2024 is setting up for a special season in Oxford as the stars begin to align. See, that is all of that stuff is massively important in what we've been talking about. And you look at a situation to where they said Ole Miss should be favored in 10 of 12. Honestly, they might be favored over LSU as well. I'm thinking they might be favored in 11 of 12. We're going to talk about this ad nauseum for the next 9 months, but I mean, it's very, very interesting to see. And then you go on to Michael Bratton, who has been on the show. He is a contributor on the Paul Feinbaum show. Here's his power rankings to go in. This is his debut 2024 SEC power rankings, where he has Georgia number 1, which makes sense. Carson Beck is coming back. Ole Miss number 2, Alabama number 3, which, man, that quarterback performance last night was shocking. Missouri number 4. I might move Missouri above Alabama if we're going to be honest. Texas 5, Tennessee 6, Oklahoma 7, LSU 8, Texas A&M 9, Kentucky 10, Florida 11, Auburn 12, South Carolina 13, Arkansas 14, Mississippi State 15, and Vanderbilt 16. If you think about Ole Miss's schedule, they do get Georgia, which is the number 1 on this list. But the next one is number 7, and then number 8, number 10, number 11, number 13, number 14, and number 15 are what is on the Ole Miss football schedule going into next season. This is another reason why schedule favorability is going to be a major, major thing for Ole Miss moving forward. Michael Bratton, like I said, he's been on our show a couple times. He does the Paul Feinbaum. He's the go-to with the Feinbaum show, honestly, because he has really cool, interesting things to say. But Ole Miss is in a really, really good spot right now going into 2024 with all the hype going on. We're going to see all these way too early rankings come out in the next 3 weeks. That's going to lead into pre-spring training or spring practice, which is going to lead into the off season and the magazine season, which is going to lead into SEC media days. And it's just going to be Ole Miss talking about consistently for 9 months in the Heisman race, in the top 5 race. All of this is going to be a major deal for the Ole Miss Rebels. And that hype is beginning. And honestly, Ole Miss deserves it. They deserve every single bit of this hype, and they need to enjoy it. And Ole Miss fans should enjoy this as well, because it's going to be a really, really important thing. Now, I do want to say thanks again. Just a second. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. 2024 hype is great, but there's still some work to be done in the portal. And we tell you about a player that will be on campus this weekend. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? Just like Ole Miss. Ole Miss is trying to go to that next level in 2024. LinkedIn Jobs knows with your success, it all depends on the team you surround yourself with, much like Ole Miss. I'm sensing a theme here. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn just isn't just another job board. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy. In fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. 2024 is going to be all about goals. And much like hiring the right football coach has Ole Miss in the discussion for the 2024 playoff, which is our massive goal going into that season. You know, if you hire the right person for your business, they can have a remarkable and measurable effect on what you do. If you hire the wrong guy, you might be doing it again in 3 years or 3 weeks. If you do it a football coach, it'd be 3 years. So it's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats that they might not have the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So all of the hype is getting started. We're going to get fired up about that, and we're going to talk about the hype as much as we can, because if you're an Ole Miss fan, this is a new situation for us, and we're going to enjoy every second of this. We're not going to just freak out now that Ole Miss is close to reaching their goals. We're going to have a good time with it. But part of Ole Miss getting that hype is their work in the transfer portal. And here are 4 names we're going to do in the rest of the show. Two names per segment that you probably need to watch out for. One is a player named Cole Rusk. He was the leading receiver and an All American at FCS Murray State last season. He's a tight end. He is 6'6", 255 pounds. Honestly, he'd be a very good complement for Hudson Wolf and Caden Prieskorn. He's not going to be called on to be the guy because of Caden Prieskorn, but he is going to push Hudson Wolf for who gets on the field shortly after he gets there, if he comes in. And the reason I'm talking like it's down the road with it is it kind of is. David Johnson from 24/7 reported that FCS All American tight end Cole Rusk has an official visit set to Ole Miss. And you look on it, it's like this weekend. And this weekend is like the end of the dead period where it goes to a quiet period somehow, where mid-year transfers can visit before enrolling in the school. So it will be really interesting to see who Ole Miss brings in. Who is going to be the players that Ole Miss bring in this visit window, really short before the latter part of the window where Ole Miss actually does a ton of work from January 13th all the way until February 2nd. Ole Miss does some work in that period. But who are going to be the players that Ole Miss brings in this week? This is the first one that we know about. His name is Cole Rusk. He's a tight end out of Murray State. Really, really good ball player, honestly. Now, another player that's getting some interest and everybody's talking about and people assume things is Percy Lewis. Says Mississippi State transfer offensive tackle Percy Lewis is inching closer to a decision, he tells On3 Sports. The 6'8", 345-pound offensive lineman put Arkansas, Auburn, Cal, Florida State, Georgia, Ole Miss, Memphis, and South Carolina in his final 8. Lots of Ole Miss people are thinking that this could happen fairly quickly. I've heard that, Auburn's always going to be a player because they're in a position to where they have to be aggressive in the transfer portal. It's kind of a adapt or die type situation for the Auburn Tigers. Arkansas, Sam Pittman is an offensive line coach. What happened last year, he does not want to happen again. So I imagine they're going to be in it. And then anytime Georgia pops up on one of these lists, if this is a serious thing, that kind of lets you know that this player is being evaluated at a very high level. So we'll see. It looks like Ole Miss is going to be well down the road with this prospect. They recruited Percy Lewis out of high school. He went to Mississippi Gulf Coast, I believe. Ended up going to Mississippi State over Ole Miss, and now he's looking to transfer out of Starkville. Starkville's on like their 18th head coach in 18 years or something. I don't know. It's a large number. Seriously, it's like 5 coaches in 7 years. So a little bit of stability is necessary for them. But so Percy Lewis doesn't want to be a part of that any longer. Interesting situation. Now, Ole Miss fans are going to look at this list, and I'm going to give everybody 4 names to look at. And they're going to say, where's the offensive lineman? Obviously, we just put Percy Lewis up there as a potential offensive lineman. But I do caution everybody to realize this. You don't just take a transfer to take a transfer. You have to take a transfer that is evaluated higher than what you have on campus. The whole purpose of the transfer portal is to improve your room. So just taking to take it, you can't really do that. You can't do that, or it's going to basically eat up your numbers and you're not going to be particularly good. So it's going to come down to evaluations with John Garrison and Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. and those guys on the front with what they want to be as somebody that gets brought in on the offensive line. I do think that 2 or 3 offensive linemen are going to come in this month, but they are going to be very slow and very selective of players that are coming in. Because if you look at the Ole Miss offensive line, here's the reality of the situation. Ole Miss played 3 extremely talented defensive lines, as talented as you're going to see anywhere in college football, and won. this season, and that being Texas A&M, LSU, and Penn State. Ole Miss won those games with the offensive line that they have. Now, granted, Victor Kern is moving on to greener pastures, and so is Quincy McGee. So Ole Miss is going to need to find players to take that role. They're going to have to recruit to do that. Now, there's some offensive linemen that I know for a fact they're pretty excited about. That being Preston Cushman, the guard out of Clearwater, Florida. And then you have Bryson Sanders, who is an interior offensive line as well. So if that is the situation, is Ole Miss recruiting tackles? Does that change the calculus a little bit for Ole Miss on the offensive line? What is Jerquan Scott being recruited as? Is he a center? Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? All of these are interesting pieces. I know with Jerquan Scott that you have kind of a Swiss Army knife that can slot in at multiple different offensive line pieces. So if Ole Miss lands Percy Lewis, who is a tackle, who is a big man, he would essentially match up and be a version similar to what Micah Pettis is. Jaden Williams coming back as well. All of a sudden, you have some pieces on the offensive line that can work a little bit. Against Penn State, Jaden Williams had a pretty good game. Now, at the beginning of the game, the tempo and the speed and the rust had to get knocked off and all of that stuff. And it was problematic for the Ole Miss offensive line. And whenever Penn State sent more than Ole Miss can block, it was problematic anyway. But if Ole Miss calls the game similar in games next year to what they did against Penn State, to where they use the quick passes, the short game, over the middle, all of that good stuff, the tight end, and help out the offensive lineman to kind of force the defense to respect that, because they're going to fear Ole Miss's wide receivers. They're going to fear Trey Harris. They're going to fear Juice Wells. They're going to fear Deion Smith. Heck, they're going to fear Caden Prieskorn. If you can affect the defense to where they have to fear them, all of a sudden it's going to make that offensive line look a little bit better. That's the reason I say the quick passes and stuff like that will make the running game and the offensive line look a ton better. The worst thing you can do is to sit right there for 2.5 seconds and throw the pass every time. That cannot be repetitive. It just can't, because if the defensive line knows they have 2.5 seconds to get home, they will. You saw that in the semifinal with Michigan and Alabama. Jalen Milroe, every pass play looked exactly the same. Drop back and then he runs. Honestly, that game looked like it was called real similar to a Mississippi 3A 7th grade game. That is what Tommy Rees does. And that's what they've done to what once was such a proud offense going through. I mean, I get that Bill O'Brien, people do not like what he did, but my goodness, them just taking apart their own offense and disassembling it, man, something absolutely crazy. I'm pretty fired up about that, honestly. There's still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Stop me if you've heard this before. Georgia Tech has a defensive lineman in the portal, and Ole Miss might be a destination. Stick around. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. All right, Ole Miss has a couple of other names that through various sources I have heard, either through Twitter or through like articles that we found online and stuff like that. And when dealing with the transfer portal, so much of what's going on is sleuth work. It is detective work. It's how we found Princely and Ellen, honestly. And it's how Chris Paul got found out. Those players in the transfer portal pretty early on, I was able to figure out that it was a fairly serious type thing before even others did it. Part of my sleuthing work as we're getting back after the Peach Bowl and after New Year's Day has led me to these two names. Okay. The first one I want to start with is Daquan Dowse. He is a defensive lineman out of Georgia Tech. He's recorded 69 career tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Anytime a defensive lineman enters the portal from Georgia Tech, I basically pay really close attention to what's going on because of Kello Stone, because of Jared Ivey, because of the relationships that have happened in that room at Georgia Tech. You can see exactly how it's going to go. Now, Daquan Dowse, you have to remember what Lane Kiffin said last year. We're about 12 months away from him saying this. And that is the transfer portal, you can go get depth. You don't have to go in and get a starter. You can go get depth. As long as they buy into that role, you can handle that. He won't be being brought in to start. He won't. He will be brought in to back up J.J. Pegues and Walter Nolan, Xavier Harris, and fight for a role on this team. And he's a good ball player. And while he might not be the best 40, 50 play a game defensive tackle, he's good. These are decent numbers. He absolutely showed out when Ole Miss played Georgia Tech this year. I think he ended up with 8 or 9 tackles. And that is another reason that my ears perked up a little bit on this as well. He played really well on game film that Ole Miss got to pay really close attention to. And with Jared Ivey, with Kello Stone, and with the defensive line set up, I think that he would be a decent depth piece that is brought in by Ole Miss football. So this is just a name that people probably need to keep an eye on. His name, Daquan Dowse, defensive lineman out of Georgia Tech. The next one is from an article that we saw on 24/7 by Chris Hummer. MAC sack leader Cassius Howell is drawing big interest in the transfer portal. He's one of the top edge rushers from the group of 5, and he's picking up a lot of interest in the transfer portal after a breakout campaign. He's more of a linebacker type jack. That is what he's being recruited as. Here's this little bit right up on him. Now that Howell's in the portal, he's heard from a bunch of Power 5 school. Howell said he has offers from Florida, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Baylor, and Minnesota. Those are the schools reaching out to Howell early in this process. Howell told 24/7 that he doesn't currently have any official visits set up, but he had told Swamp 24/7 previously he was considering a visit to the Florida Gators. Good ball player. It's an explosive player. Now, Ole Miss is mixing and matching on the defensive side of the ball, and you saw like SEC level starters with Princely Amamielin, who if he visits Florida and if he went to Florida, this would be a like for like type person that they would bring in to replace him. Walter Nolan, Tyler Barron, Tamari McDonald, lots of SEC level starters have already been recruited and committed to Ole Miss. So everybody's like, well, this is a G5. This is somebody from Bowling Green. Why should my ears perk up about that? Remember, I am all about the G5 player being called up ostensibly. A lot of these transfers I view as call ups, and I think Ole Miss uses the portal as a way to do that. Cassius Howell is a 6'4", 235-pound defensive end from Bowling Green. Top rusher, lots of sacks, really gets after the quarterback. When you look at what Ole Miss is building and you try to think of why this offer was basically put out, because I do think with what Ole Miss's offense or defense is doing right now, I think offers you need to pay attention to. And they've got Tyler Barron and they got Princely Amamielin. Where would Cassius Howell fit into the, I don't know, the ether, essentially, on Ole Miss's defense? Would he come in and contribute real quick? Is Ole Miss trying to basically build a NASCAR package to deal with spread offenses that throw the football, to deal with these air raid type teams? Like LSU had they would drop back and they're going to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game. Is Cassius Howell an idea to where you can put Princely Amonmiela and Tyler Barron, Cassius Howell and Walter Nolan on the field and said, hey, have fun. Get back there. Jaden Daniels no longer plays for your team, and you're going to throw the ball and you're going to drop back that much. We're going to get people that can get to the quarterback. It makes you think the thought process that they're going through at the moment. Good players. These 4 players are definitely players that you should keep in mind. Now, Ole Miss is not going to get all of them, likely. They're just not. But these are 4 names that you should probably pay attention to. These are the ones that are popping up on the radar more than, say, some others. But remember, we've got this early transfer portal visit window starting this weekend for a couple of days, and they shut down for the national championship game and the convention, and then it opens back up again around January 15th. And from January 15th until the end of February, Ole Miss does work in that period. That is where Ole Miss has gotten a ton of transfers over the last 2 years, including Jackson Dart. So pay attention to that as well. Now, I will realize that it might condense down a little bit because the transfer portal window closes today as opposed to closing on like the 15th. It used to be a 45-day window, and then it became a 30-day window. So we'll see if that changes by condensing it down, but Ole Miss does work. Remember, just because the transfer portal window closes, that just means that players can't get in unless they have a coach leave or something like that. It has nothing to do with who you can sign and the commitments you can get. That date is going to be Ole Miss's last day of drop ad, and which is probably sometime around the first part of February. So that is going to be the day that is important for Ole Miss Rebel fans. So should be really good. But today we talked about the hype that Ole Miss football is getting and how it's starting. And we gave you 4 names that you need to watch for in the near future for Ole Miss football. I'm pretty fired up about that. I do want to say thanks to everyone for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Every dayers, we continue to turn our attention to the portal, and SEC hoops season starts with a matchup between number 22 Ole Miss and number 5 Tennessee. For your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.